People are able to prevent failure modes from happening. Just knowing your customer is so important. But as you start to grow, you need people to take your broad vision and convert it into product. And therefore, you need people who understand these problems very deeply and probably even better than you. So I traded money for opportunity, and it was such a fantastic decision.
How are you looking at AI and from where Indian founders can build?
This is definitely like a very meaningful shift. Indian founders should trying to probably build an infrastructure layer company.
What is the systemic problem why innovation is lacking?
Most of software innovation really happened in the world after internet existed. We are living in a pre-internet era in healthcare. No information is actually getting exchanged.
What's your thought on AI in healthcare?
Bet that we have sort of really taken is that
Hello. Before we get started with this episode, I quickly wanted to share that we are now a part of the Zerodha Media Network. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, with a founder who has done things which are usually very challenging and considered almost improbable from the outside. This founder has built perhaps the largest and the fastest growing vertical software company from India in US healthcare, which seems like a black box from outside, and having started initially in India and then moving to the Bay Area. Join me in welcoming Abhinav Shashank, who's the co-founder and CEO of Innovaccer. Thank you so much, Abhinav, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us.
I'm super delighted to be hosting you because I think, like I was mentioning, right? Think of building a vertical software company that's challenging, building it from India, that's more challenging, and then in healthcare in the US, even more challenging. And you've ticked off all of those boxes. And how I think you spoke on one of the podcasts mentioning that you're on 250 million in ARR, perhaps the fastest growing sort of vertical software company in the world today. I want to dive deep into all of those things. But I do want to understand initially to get a sense of how you got started, because you also started super young, from what I understand. So how did the bug of entrepreneurship sort of bite you? What was it that got you started on this journey? If you can lead with that would be great context and we go further.
Yeah, no, happy to sort of share that so I feel I think Kharagpur, we went to undergrad at IIT Kharagpur. KGP basically played such a pivotal role in shaping us as individuals. Two of us basically as founders, and myself, I think from Kharagpur, Sandy is the third co-founder. He's from Ahmedabad. But right when we were at KGP, in the fourth year, we started something called the Kharagpur Consulting Group. The thesis was basically that Indian academic institutions and industry collaboration is not really strong, and therefore if you could basically figure out a way for these entities to collaborate deeply, you could really set up the innovation engine both at IITs as well as these companies getting incredible research going out of there. That was an incredible hit, right when we sort of really started, but we didn't know how to make money doing that. Because all of the money that was really coming from these institutions was going to Kharagpur. We didn't make any money in the middle, right? But that gave us I think a pretty shaping experience early in life where we could go to companies, we could go to and pitch them and if you had a strong product and IIT Kharagpur or the IIT network was a strong product to sell, and if you could have a strong product, you very quickly sort of really realized that people are willing to pay money, and what does it take to get it converted into a contract, what does it sort of really take to build out a company, what does it take to build out a team, and what does working with exceptional people who were around you sort of really meant. And I think that was an incredible lesson for us. So we really knew I think coming out of KGP that we are going to go start something at some point.
What year was this?
This was 2010. So we knew we are going to go start something at some point. We just didn't know what. Right. So Kanav went to do his master's in the US. He came to Boston. He basically studied intellectual property, innovation, monetization, a bunch of things like that. I went to this company called Ingersoll-Rand, which was a fairly large Fortune 500 company, did manufacturing across the world. I got to work on such incredible problems. They were they had 210 or something companies at that point, and were doing manufacturing across basically a bunch of them. And IoT was new, data was new, cloud was new. All of these things were like getting innovated out there. So I got to work on creating what could be the intelligent cloud layer on top of this entire thing. Like, how do you connect all of these sort of like things together? How can you get a mobile phone to sort of really like control all of these things in general? I went to visit China. I saw the scale of what China was sort of really doing. It is like mind-boggling. They had factories of the sizes of cities. You could go into Guangzhou like at that point and start walking and like keep walking for days, and like the factories won't end. It was like mind-boggling for me, like especially like as a 21, 22-year-old person, that what is happening here, right? So I sort of spent a ton of time between China, Bangalore, Dallas. These were the three centers in which manufacturing was happening in China, engineering design was happening in Bangalore, and then product specifications were sort of really happening in Texas. So I got to sort of really learn from best in the world in some way. Like, how do you sort of really build like a scalable product? How do you deploy it? And I was sort of really working as the chief of staff to the person who was running this business. So I got to see basically what business building at scale looks like. We got a bunch of money, as an entrepreneurship project. And when I joined, I wrote the first document on what does this product look like. And when I left 3.5 years later, it was $70 million in revenue. Oh, right. So it was just such an exhilarating experience for someone coming right out of undergrad, that holy shit, I think this is so amazing, right? So I got to sort of learn a ton, also learned a bunch about what does building a product mean? How do you sort of really take it to market? What does marketing mean? What does P&Ls basically mean? How do you think about finance? That all of this is not some engineering project that you do it and it's great. I think this has to produce money, because when you work in a Fortune 500 company, they're very, very stringent on I think how much bottom line, how much top line, and all of those sort of things. It was just an incredible experience. And the thing is, I think when I graduated out of KGP, I had an offer to join someone at twice the salary that Ingersoll Rand was paying me. And so I made a conscious choice to basically go do this job, I think at half the salary, but it was because the experience here wouldn't have basically been anywhere close to the experience that I think twice the money would have sort of given me. So that was I think a bet that I had sort of really taken. I don't think it was a big bet, but personally, I bet this was the right thing for me to do. No one really went in manufacturing from IIT. So everyone is I want to go to McKinsey, and I want to basically go to a bunch of supply chain companies or e-commerce companies. I was dude, I studied mechanical engineering, and I want to go do something that I studied, and this is best in breed opportunity that I can sort of get. I negotiated really hard for my role. I really said that I want to do something that is meaningful for the company, that would give me visibility. I don't want to basically do something. So I traded money for opportunity, and it was such a fantastic decision to make. I still want. I got to work with the India CEO of Ingersoll Rand. At that point, I got to basically work with the global CEO of Ingersoll Rand at that point. And as a 22, 23-year-old, what more do you want? Yeah, right. So we did that, and the 3 years were incredible. I actually met Sandy, who's my co-founder, there as well. He was in a separate program. He had just graduated out of Ahmedabad and joined a company, and then Kanav had basically finished his master's and was just coming back. This was 2013, and at that point, I think three of us in Delhi sort of really thought, okay, I think now that we're back here, what do we sort of do? Sandy was wanting to do a startup. He had worked at Microsoft before. He joined Ingersoll Rand for similar motivations, that he wanted to do a startup at some point. And so we but the one thing that I had already learned at Ingersoll Rand was data is going to explode. Because even though that this was a manufacturing company, most of what we were building was intelligent systems, and which all basically meant that data is basically like, I think, at the center of everything. So I think like the core learning that we had was that all of these like, I think, devices that are around us, like all of us as people, are going to create so much data that the infrastructure that is needed to manage a lot of these things just does not exist, and we had to spend millions of dollars to basically build out that infrastructure. And even of like someone of the size and scale of Innovaccer, and I took sort of it, right? Like so that meant that there was no easy product for people to productionalize their intelligence systems. So, and that was sort of really like, I think, like the thing that we said, that like, okay, like we've sort of seen how to sort of really do this. Like it's hard, it's complicated. How do we sort of redo this? Like, I think, like at scale. So I went to like a bunch of like, I think, like people. Krishna Mehra was and Anish was doing capillary technologies at that point. Like that was like the hottest like startup like in SaaS like at that point. Like I still feel like it was amongst the best startups to really like come out of India. And we went to like, I think, like them for some advice. Like they said like, okay, like I think if you want to build this, like it's going to be hard. Like do you really like want to do this? Like because you remember like I think 2013, 2014, everyone was trying to do e-commerce. Yeah. Like, and because
years and Flipkart became a unicorn, Mara was chasing e-commerce companies.
and like everyone said that why would you do e-commerce, right? Like, but our general thinking was like that you don't know anything about e-commerce. Like, I know how to basically build a data platform. I know how to basically create like something that scales, something that can truly be world class. Why would I go do e-commerce? Like, I think until the second or third years of the startup, like everyone still kept saying like, do you guys really want to like not pivot it into like a e-commerce startup or something? Like, so we went like, I think like to, even though we did not have like, I think like too much of a business plan, we had created like a demo like which really worked. We actually for testing, we had sent it out to like, I think like a bunch of universities like Harvard, MIT, Stanford. 65 top 100 research institutions actually used the platform. Everyone said it's great. Like, right. So we had like product market fit like to a certain degree. This was not the audience that would eventually like, I think like pay us and we could become $1 billion business in, but it gave us such incredible validation that like the best in the world feel that this is a great product. And this was easy. Like all of their emails were basically available. Like, I think like on their websites, we basically went and wrote like a crawling like infrastructure. We got like, I think all of those things and sent it out as an email blast. Like use our platform. Like people said, great. Like how much does it cost? $50. Like go basically use the platform. So we did that. We used like I think levered like used basically a lot of like I think like our technical capability that we had built out and actually got to $1 million in ARR, like just doing this, right? Like in a market that had no money, right? So at that point, I think like I went to Innovaccer India CEO, like I went to like Rajan, like who was then like Google India CEO. I went to like Vinay, who was head of like JP Morgan India Equities at that point. And like Anish and Krishna and these guys basically like I think just wrote to everyone and we got like $3 million in cheap money, right? Like so,
And this is 2014 to
50, like right, like so year to build it out, like year to like I think like so some of that sort of like I think like had happened. The strange part was at $1 million of ARR we were making so much money, like bottom line. Right, like because we were what like 24, 25-year-olds. Like I think all of our hires were 18, 19 years old kids. We knew the architecture they would code, and it was just like I think like incredible to build it out to a degree where everyone felt it was world class. Like our thesis was that if Sundar Pichai can basically go become like the CEO of like Google, and if Satya can go become like the CEO of Microsoft, like I think like why can't we build world class software from India? Like and every time basically someone said no. Most of the VCs that we went to, like I think the biggest thing that everyone said was that this can't be done out of India. Like we've never seen the STA company sort of do this. Like, why would you guys be successful? We came to the US, like I think like pitched to investors here. They were like, I think, hey, this can't be done out of India. We went to pitch to Indian investors. They were like, oh, it can't be done out of India. So it's like, I mean, a strange place. Like the only people who sort of really believed it could be done were people like Anish Krishna or people who had seen us work. Like I think, so I think that we got together $3 million. Like we basically started, like I think, coming to the US, we got a large number of Fortune 500 companies like as customers. Like we got Disney, Water Stewards, NASA, like a bunch of these basically, like I think, like as customers.
How were you converting them? All of it on the back of a world-class product?
Mostly that. And it was strange, like, because you would go into these, like, I think, like, boardroom meetings, like, I think, like, and people will still be looking at, like, where is your boss, right? Like, because you're young place from India, like, where is adult supervision? Like, so it is, like, I think, like, fun to go into these meetings. We would just go and basically, like, I think, demo the product. People would basically look at it and say, like, this looks great. Like, is it real? Like, and like we would give it like a bit like to people for testing, and like they would sort of be like look at it and say that seems to work. Like, right? Like, and so we converted a bunch. It was not easy, right? Like I think like because you're going against the grain in most of this. So no one really felt that world-class software can be delivered out of India.
Yeah.
Like, and I think like the bigger fight was perception than the reality, right? Like if we would have started this company like in San Francisco,
yeah,
everyone would have bought like I think like this like from investors,
originality, every capital, right? Talent, all of it.
And that was sort of like I think like my big learning on the starting point. That when Warren Buffett or these people sort of say that like you have to be willing to be contrarian like to be successful, it really like I think like means something. Like it's not like I think like just things that you read in a book. If you stick by what you sort of really feel is a large opportunity and with the intent that you can go basically deliver it, it's doable, man. Like nothing in the world is basically being done by AGI yet. Like I think like it was some human that was sort of really like I think like building it. Like and if they can do it, you can do it too. Like so that was like I think like a little bit of naive optimism that we sort of really had as 24-25-year-olds, which led to the fact that like I think like we continued to persist and even in the face of like most people sort of really looking at us and saying that it would not be possible, we would still basically go ahead and like do it. Right. So I think it was like a fun time to basically like I think like start up the business, and this was sort of like how we got started. To your question, very long way of telling you that.
But this is amazing. I think so many crucial learnings of just that. Opportunity, growth, prioritization over money, believing in yourself, building a world-class product. I think this is amazing. I'm so glad you shared this, and it's a great starting point. I want to get to the Innovaccer journey and the pivot that helped you get to healthcare. But before that, I want to maybe upfront also address. So you spent the last sort of 8-9 years in the Valley now, right? Like you've been in the Bay Area, and you sort of do this as a company as a dual thing, right? Like you have some team in India, you have a team here. How has that sort of shaped your thinking, right? Like, can you maybe just like heads up also address what is the difference that it makes if you're here? How does that shape your thinking? What is the differential that you have seen in founders that sort of sell here, build here, grow up here? And how does that make a difference in company trajectory? Because I think that's one of the objectives that I'm trying to achieve with this sort of Bay Area series. So I think if we can address that head on, and then we'll go to the 2016 onward journey with Innovaccer.
Yeah. So I think like for us, being in the US markets early was incredibly helpful. Like there are a few things. Like one, the need of automation in global markets is far more than Indian markets. Just generally, like cost of labor is higher, like and therefore, like I think like everyone is looking to automate everything.
Acceptance for the product is just way higher.
So if you go to build software, like I think if the cost of labor is effectively like I think higher, it would basically tend to work better than those markets, right? So therefore, like software is generally like more adaptability, like in US and Europe, like any of these markets where like cost of labor is high, right? So that was like I think like one, right? Like we tried selling this like I think like in India, like we got RBI to sort of re-adopt. We got like I think like a couple of like I think like other large institutions to sort of re-adopt. But frankly, like selling software in India, like everyone was generally like, I will put 10 engineers and basically like I think that not that they will be 10 engineers were not going to be building this, but like I think everyone felt so. Because you could hire basically like I think like 10 people and the cost of basically like engineering talent was low. So then basically like when we came to the US, like I think people really wanted to think through how to apply this rather than like debating the question that like whether this is needed or not, right? So your discovery of the use cases on top of what you're building, right, became like I think far more faster.
So the friction to sell is lesser, and our competing basis product, innovation alpha, and if you've been able to deliver that, then people are very.
So it just wherever we went to, like I think most of the conversations, like whether in New York, whether here in the Bay Area, whether like I think like in Dallas, Chicago, like most of the conversations were use case. Like how do we apply this? Like what is the problem to sort of resolve? It was not like conversations around, do we need a data infrastructure? Do we need like a platform to sort of redo these things? So that way, basically, like our initial discovery of like I think like where product market fit would sort of really exist just became like I think like so much shorter, right? Because like now I'm going to customers, I'm talking to them like on a day-on-day basis, like I'm getting feedback. I know basically 10 things that will not work like I think far more quickly like than if I was sitting in India trying to explain like why a data infrastructure is sort of really needed, right?
So your iteration's also better, product is getting better, so that flywheel is working in your favor.
That was like I think like the biggest advantage that early stage we sort of really like I think like got that if we would not have been close to the customer, if we would not like I think like tried to understand these things and gotten these things like as features and functionalities into our product, that we would have been stuck. And which is why where like I felt like a lot of our peers like who were still basically like in India got stuck, that the iteration cycle that they basically got into was a year long, while we would have basically released 12 versions of the product like that, right? Like so and in startups, like there's no right answer, like there's just like I think the speed of iteration, right? Like, and whoever is cycling through iterations like faster eventually ends up sort of really winning, like and therefore like being closer to the market, I feel like I think like allows you that like alpha for sure.
No, that's amazing. And I think we're seeing the same thing in this post-AI world where pace of innovation is even more. And so if you're not here, you potentially miss out on so much customer interaction. Oh, that's amazing. I think that foundationally clarifies it. Any talent differential? Like I think in my opinion, like there's deeply technical talent here and the market is also deep. So that makes for a great combination. What has your observation been? In my opinion, otherwise talent like to like is pretty much similar. I don't think there's a major differential. But what is your ground reality? And as somebody who's built successfully here, what are the other factors that enable you to build?
I think like talent has to be looked at in two different themes, I would say, right? Like there is just like the raw talent, like right, which is like I think ability to code, ability to understand like the theoretical constructs, ability to like I think like really do stuff, right? I think that talent is pretty much like equivalent here and there. Like you can hire like someone from Stanford here, or you can hire like I think like someone from IIT there. Like it's the exact same talent. Like the thing that we've sort of really found like I think here is that people have failed a lot more here. Like they know hundreds of ways like how this will fail. Like right, like I think like when you deploy a system at this scale, like these are all the failure modes. Right, like so as a startup, like I think what you get like from talent here is that people are able to prevent failure modes from happening, like right, and that degree of just because of the nature of like they've scaled basically petabytes and billions of like I think like people, or basically like I think like enterprises, Fortune 500s, what does SOC 2 basically look like? What does security look like? How do you sort of really architect these things? Like how does like scale like happen? How do you authenticate basically like a particular thing? How do you sort of rebuild systems that would not break? What are production grade sort of like an like thing? Some of this I feel what you get as an advantage here is that people have already failed doing it. Like because the first time I'm sure basically people here doing it, like I think like they failed as well.
Right.
But then like I think it got embedded that you don't want to commit this mistake. Like and if you only think about like first principles, you would go through like a series of your mistakes, right? Like so that
Trained, experienced talent which can avoid failure.
Yeah.
Very interesting nuance. Thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Anything else?
So that's I think like one, and second I think like in product management, just knowing your customer is so important, right? Like I think early stage basically like you are the product manager, right? The CEO, maybe like the chief, like founders, like you are the product person, right? Like, but as you start to grow, you need people to basically like I think like take your broad vision and convert it into product features and functionalities, and what does it sort of really take, and therefore you need people who understand these problems very deeply and probably even better than you, and that will only come from your market. Now if you're building a product like I think for the Indian consumer, you will find that talent in India. Like if you are building that product like I think like for Middle East or Dubai, like you will find that talent in Dubai. Like but if you're building for the American enterprise, like you will only find that talent here, right? So I think one of the things that people sort of really don't like do like is to get enough product talent into the company, and this is something that I learned. Like I think this is not like how I thought about things, but as I basically iterated through it, like I realized that having people who have a deep understanding of the problem statement that you're trying to solve on your team, so that they can extend the vision rather than basically just be executors of vision, like is an incredibly important thing. Like and at the size and scale that we've sort of really got into, like if we didn't have like I think like that degree of talent, like Dr. Ness, like I think like we hired as our chief medical officer like 6 years ago, like and if there wasn't basically like I think Ness or like Dr. Anil Jain, like who was like chief medical information officer at Cleveland Clinic, like these people just have like I think so much depth in understanding that they act as teachers and coaches for you, like right? Like and your ability as a founder to have people like this around you, like who you can just go to and feel like that this is an incredible coach, like just like helps. Like so when you have the money, get really good coaches, bro. Like so that's sort of like at least been like my thought process for sure.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's super nuanced, and I think my takeaway is like to like talent is the same, but experienced, field, depth of market really enhances their iteration loop, which helps you build like better products and sell better. So that's an interesting nuance. The final leg on this is just I mean, people talk about the air of the market here. Then I also believe that in the 2 weeks that I spent here also briefly, I've seen that a person's ability to dream with conviction is just way higher here, which is why their ability to take risk is also higher, because somebody they know in their immediate vicinity is built like $1 billion, $10 billion company, right? Which is far lesser sort of in India, and of course growing at rapid pace and has sort of grown significantly now. But what have you noticed on the qualitative side that has impacted your mindset, and maybe by extension your ambition, confidence, and any thoughts on that?
My general sense is that cost of failure here is nothing. Like you try something, you basically like it doesn't sort of like I think like work out, like it's like badge of honor. Like I tried, like and the more complicated thing you try, like it's actually like treated well, right? Like I come from like a family of civil services, like I think like folks back in India. For the longest time, like 4th year into the startup, my mom was generally like, "Beta civil services kar lo," like right, like and And what is civil service? Like it's great. Like I think there is everyone in my family is basically like in civil service, right? Like, but it's the most secure like job in the world, right? Like
You work so hard to get to be the most secure.
yeah, right. Like I think so. So Indian thought process, at least now it's like I think like evolved quite dramatically. Like 10 years ago, basically, like I think it was still early stages. Like maybe Sachin and Binny were like I think like the shining lights for like I think for all of us, but it was still basically very early. Like, and if you told anyone that like you're doing a startup, like I think like good luck getting married, right? Like so I think like that was sort of like I think that has evolved quite a bit these days. When I go to I think like IITs, like at this point, like everyone is wanting to do a startup, right? So I think that's evolved. Like the risk-taking appetite, like I think like in India has sort of really gotten like much stronger at this point than it was 10 years ago. It doesn't feel like that like at any particular moment. But it, like, believe me, like I think, like for someone who's basically been doing this 10 years, it's night and day.
Yeah,
it's night and day.
I find it hard to relate, by the way. Like I've been active in the professional world in the last 2020 to now, and I think it's fairly comfortable to take risk now. Not to the extent that it is here. Like I know that a Stanford or a Berkeley undergrad kid here feels like okay, it's easy to start up. It's not the same, but it's definitely become far
simpler. It's the same.
It is?
It is the exact, like I just feel like it's even lower risk in India.
Yeah. Like, in theory, yes. I'm saying it's not penetrated as much. Shark Tank successes or 110 unicorns. Now we can see people like you, right? Like somebody looking at this podcast will be like, you're from KGP, you did it, why can't he?
Yeah.
And I think that's the purpose of this, right? Like, so can you make entrepreneurship through builders like you seem realistically possible? But are there any stories of like how you met somebody here or like, the air, like, is that real? Like, does it really push your level of ambition or is that a bit romanticized or?
It's very real. Like, I think like, so I'll tell you like an example. Like, we came here through 500 startups. Like, I think like 500 startups was the accelerator that we came here with. And Pulkit like was my batchmate, like he was our VP of product. I think like at that point we were in Palo Alto, like I think like one of these days, like going from like I think like one point to the other. 3 things happened basically like that day. One was we met this guy, like I think like he was sitting at Starbucks. We basically like started talking to him, like and then basically realized that this is a Nobel laureate. Like that's our prof was laureate. Like okay, wow. So. Like I think for a little bit you were like, dude, like what just happened?
Yeah.
And then we like he sort of like said like I think like Stanford it's like I think like still okay, like Berkeley if you go like I think you get a special parking like if you're a Nobel laureate, like so we like it's insane, right? Like I think, so that sort of really happened. Then like I think I had a pitch with one of these venture capitalists, like I think like it was either Axel or someone, like I don't remember, but when I went to pitch, like I think like the same day, like he was like I think like this is the seat on which Zuckerberg basically had thought like pitched sat and pitched, right? Like so that was like
that's crazy.
Should I even be sitting it like so that was sort of like I think like the second thing. And the third thing like was like when we came back after the pitch, like I think we went to like Starbucks on University Avenue, like, and every table had a pitch going on. Every table had a pitch going on, like, and it was insane. Like, I think, like, what is happening? Like, and where are you?
Wow.
So I think like that degree of entrepreneurial energy that is here in this place, concentrated, like, is just like very, very different. And I don't know, like, if it's like the same in Bangalore, like these days or not, like. But I would find it like even hard to sort of believe. Like it's a conjunction of like a multitude of things. There's like Berkeley, there's Stanford, there's like Google, there's Microsoft. Like everyone sort of here. Plus there's a bunch of startups. You can go from one end to the 101 and like the other of 101. And any achievement that you've done, like let's say you've built a $10 billion business, you can go on 101 and basically feel, by the end of it feel like, what have I done in my life? Wow. Right. So I think that continuous push for people and strive for people that there is so much more to sort of really achieve and do, like is just I don't think there is a place like this on the planet anywhere. Like I would not say like I think that it's even in the US there is not a place like this. Like it's not like US versus India. It's like even in the US there isn't a place like this. So I think like that definitely gives you a little bit of, dude, there's so much more to do at all points in life. Like whatever you've sort of done, like I think the continuous push towards doing more is much easily found here than any other place on the planet.
That's amazing. No, that's so well explained. Thank you so much for sharing. I love it. Having clarified this, let's now come back to the Innovaccer journey, right? So you now built a great product, it's selling, you raised some funding, but you now made this pivot. You realize that there's a deeper use case in healthcare, which I'd love for you to share. Even before you sort of get to that, if you can in a minute explain everything that Innovaccer does, and to the extent that I do understand it's a unified layer for sort of data layer for healthcare, and on top of that you build multitude sort of applications, some on the doctor side, some on the, I don't think there's a patient side yet, is there? But if you can explain that bit and then maybe tell us how the pivot happened and what was the progression thereon, I think that'll be amazing.
Yeah. So I think like at the highest level, I would say like I think like we are building the AI orchestration layer for like healthcare. Okay. Right. Like that's why we basically called the entire thing like the data activation platform before. Like I think that AI orchestration was not a term that people sort of really understood. And if we would have said that, like people would have been get out. Like, but at all points we did not call it a data platform, but a data activation platform. Like I think like for that reason. That this is not just for you to basically like collate or collect data, but this is to activate data, like I think like downstream for you to make like healthcare workflows better. So what is the problem in US healthcare? Like the US spends $4.5 trillion on healthcare. Like maybe 5 by the time we finish this interview, like which is larger than India's GDP. Yeah, right. Like if US healthcare was a country, it would have been the third largest like GDP on the planet. Like, and even after that, like I think like outcomes are not that great.
Yeah.
Right. So what is sort of really happening? Like we're spending all of this money, like but like I think the outcomes are not that great. Like what is sort of really happening now? What has ended up sort of really happening is that because of a lot of the last generation like technological shifts that happened, like data security that sort of really happened, we are living in a pre-internet era in healthcare. Like no information is actually getting exchanged. People are still faxing stuff. Right, like so we are living like I think a little bit in the pre-internet era, like in healthcare. And if you think like anything in the world that would basically live in that era, like if you had to book a taxi and you had to send a fax for that, it would be very inefficient. And so is US healthcare, right? Like so the first thing that we did was to create like I think like an infrastructure that allows for people to sort of really get this data upon a unified cloud platform and open it up, right? Like how do you basically like I think create? So you basically now created an internet of healthcare. On top of the internet of healthcare, like now let's basically start building apps. We built few like that got a lot of like I think like traction. So we had focused on that. Like now we are sort of expanding it. We open it the ecosystem up. Like we get startups to sort of really build on top of it. A long-term thesis for us is to basically be the intelligent internet for healthcare. Right? Like so that's what we are trying to do over a longer-term period. It's like I think like don't care like I think where it is like I think like today like it's like incredibly more better than where it was let's say like a few years ago, but I think like we're still in very early stages of like I think like that to sort of really like happen.
That's amazing. But how did the pivot happen? How did you discover this? And outside in again, penetrating US healthcare feels like a very insider sort of problem to solve. Whatever. But you were an outsider. You didn't come from the ecosystem. And also Indian healthcare, US healthcare is starkly different, right? So to understand that would have also been a challenge. How did many of these things come together for you to actually come to the problem and then also solve for it? And also like what was selling motion like? Because I'm guessing converting some of these hospitals, you got an early customer which was sort of pivotal, right? So if you can maybe turn back time and talk to us about some of these things, that would be really helpful.
So I think we had like after like the initial phase, like I think like we raised $3 million, we were already selling to enterprises, we were like we had Disney, Waters, NASA, a bunch of these like I think like as customers, we had ramped up to $4.5 million or so, like I think like of ARR. First year basically like I think like we got to maybe like 0.3, 0.4, we went from 0.3 to like 4.5. Like it is growing really rapidly. Now one of the things that like I think like we, and at that point like we met Sumir, like I think like from Westbridge, he basically wrote like I think like the first, like we raised $15 million or something, like I think like in his Series A, he sort of really led it, like he was like actually very counter like to most investors at that point. Like he was like I think like you guys are trying to do something like which seems pretty improbable that this is going to happen. Like, let me put in the money. So I think it is fantastic. Like Sumir sort of like I think like has been such an incredible believer and mentor. Like I think like for us like as a company, like so they put in like I think the initial seed check, like Series A sort of like I think like check into the business. At that point, like we had let's say like $15 million in the bank. Like. Do $15 million for a software company being built out of India is a lot of money. Yeah. Right. Like, and in the first board meeting, like I think like we went and like presented like, oh, this is like incredible growth. Like all of these sort of like things are happening. He said, you guys are sort of really doing too much. Like I think like you need to focus. Like we went back and like I think I actually thought about it because we were struggling with the fact that in one day, like we were also trying to understand like Disney's business model, and the other day we were trying to understand like what is Stewart's business model, because data problems are not like you can't like solve them unless you understand like the business construct, right? Like so it was just like we were spread too thin, frankly. And we had one healthcare customer, like which was in Des Moines, Iowa, like this system called Mercy One. Like this was like one of the largest like health systems in the non-profit like health systems in the country. Like and we said like I think like okay, like this problem in like Mercy like seems like such a large problem that doctors are using technology that was built before we were born. Like and an Uber driver to everyone seems to have like better technology than the most important thing in our life, which is like our doctors. Like so this seems like a good enough and big enough problem to basically solve. Like and the extent of our aspiration at that point was, can we get to $10 million of ARR doing this? Because that is like the biggest we could think like at that point. Like and it seemed like I think like yes, we will get to that. Like so we said like then there is no risk. Like if our aspiration is like I think like how do we get to $10 million of ARR? We know this can sort of really happen. Let's do it. Like no one's going to lose money. Like if we sort of really did that, like $10 million of ARR, probably $100 million business. People sort of really invested at lower valuations than that. They'll sort of really make our money. We'll sort of like I think like be happy like if we did that. So that was sort of like I think like the extent of conversation that we had. The core thesis of our business has been naivety. Like just basically like I think figure out how to get to the next step. Like and like everything else we'll sort of really figure out later. Right. Like so we said like I think like okay, this seems like a bet that we can take. Sumir had already said like I don't think like he was meaning this, but he has already set focus. So we shut down 90% of our business. Like it went to $5 million of ARR. It shut down 90% of our business, came down to $500,000 of ARR. So like now in 2017, basically we are $500,000 ARR business. Like and was it scary? A little bit. Like but like probably more for Sumir than us. Like and so we went into the next board meeting. We said like we shut it down. Like and he was like, we're focusing. There goes my money. Like so it is like I think like a little bit of fun, but like I think they were panicked probably. Like but what they said was like, listen, dude, like I think like we have 100 companies that we've sort of really invested in. This is your own one. And if you guys basically believe this is the right thing to sort of redo, like then this is the right thing to do. And which is what I sort of really feel like has been such a differentiated relationship like with like our investors, that we've sort of really got like this deep believing like investors in the business. At any point we've not really felt that there is a investor founder conversation that is happening. It has always felt like that everyone around the table is a co-founder. And that's sort of really been like really helpful. So we then narrowed it down. We said like we're going to build like I think whatever looks like the system of intelligence for healthcare. This seems like I think like a fairly broken industry. We'll build this layer that sort of really like I think resides on top of current systems, and then really create like what could be like I think like a bunch of applications on top of it. And in 2 years we got to $10 million of ARR. And it was great. Like I think like how did we get to $10 million of ARR? We delivered. And we sat down, we lived in Des Moines, like Kanav, Ankit, like who's our CTO, Sandy, like all of us lived in Des Moines. Like Des Moines, I don't even know, like where it's in Iowa, right? So
that's good to ask.
Yeah, so it's like we lived there, like it was freezing winters. We would just live there, like we would sleep there, like in the hospital. And our customers were like I think like great to us as well. That was the other thing that happened. That obviously we knew nothing about healthcare. And our customers were ready to teach us. They were basically telling us these are the things, like this is how diabetes is measured, this is how basically heart failure is measured, and like obviously we were good students, we learned like I think pretty quickly, and we hired like people like who gave us basically like context and all of those sort of like things very quickly as well. But it was so great to live there, live the problem, build. And like the last vendor that they were using was not able to do it in 36 months, and we got it done like in 6 months. Like a data infrastructure that like I think they could sort of really like use. It was not perfect, but it was usable, right? And so that gave them like a bunch of like I think confidence, and that contract basically like I think moved from being $500,000 to $2 million, one contract, right? And then they called up everyone.
That is so good. Why don't you use it?
Yeah, and we had 0 salespeople, and we got to $10 million of ARR. Like only founders fell, of course. Yeah, right.
It's amazing.
It was great. I think it was all word of mouth. And that's the thing that works in vertical software that people don't realize is that if you have a good product, like cost of sales is very low.
Adoption is high.
It's all word of mouth. Viva basically became like I think like this massive company, $40 billion sort of $50 billion. I don't even know like today like where they are $40-50 billion basically business. They've never had like I think like too many salespeople. Epic, which is like I think the largest, like maybe $6 billion or $5-6 billion like I think like in revenue. Yeah. They had 8 salespeople. 8 salespeople. And that is, I think, like the beauty of vertical software in general, that if you get it right, the flywheel there is basically like very, very good. But you have to basically invest in customer success like pretty deeply. You have to make sure like I think like your product innovation sort of really happens. Most of go-to-market spend in healthcare is R&D and customer success. Build great product, serve customers well. Right. If you keep doing that, it's just hopefully it's worked till now, hopefully it keeps working I think in the future, that we deliver for our customers, and that sort of results into more sales happening.
And it's amazing.
So yeah.
Wow, what a story. I think this is commendable. True story of, I think you've really simplified the riskability and ability to focus, and I think those are very important elements. But true story of building a great product, being hands-on, really selling well, and if you get the basics right like you did, I think you have a great trajectory. That's amazing to hear. I'd love to understand, maybe a final bit on scale, and then I want to get to AI and a couple of other things which are super crucial for the conversation as well. But while you get to 10 million, and that was the extent to the ambition, right? But then now you are at 250. Talk to us about where, scale, size, learnings that are different that may not be applicable necessary for 0 to 1, but are applicable for 1 to 10? Also curious to understand that if the industry is so big, market is so large and is broken, is there a systemic issue why innovation does not happen in healthcare that you had to deal with? Or is it more that it's not the most obvious opportunity? Like, what is the systemic problem why innovation is lacking?
So, firstly, I think we are closer to 200 than 250, today. The general reason, I think, to your question, what is broken in healthcare is that most of software innovation, really happened in the world after internet existed. So if the information is basically not unlocked, you can't basically have a lot of software innovation sort of really happening. And the only place that information is still locked is healthcare.
So the infrastructure that enables internet and digital innovation is not enabled.
It's not enabled, and that's what you're being. And so that's basically our entire thesis. That the biggest thing that is broken is the infrastructure layer. It is not really the apps on top. The apps on top is the easy part. Once the information infrastructure really gets opened up, you will see so many billion-dollar businesses basically being built in healthcare. But go ask any healthcare software founder that why did you die? It was
infrastructure in exist.
It was so expensive. I had to go do this at every place, and every place implementation cost was basically $1 million to connect to all of the systems and all of these sort of things. And if you imagine, if you didn't have internet today, everything would be so hard. Right. Everything that we take for granted today, like Google Maps, locational, services, or web search and scraping, or any one of these sort of things. If that did not exist, if Google did not exist in this world, our innovation would have been slower. Just that Google does not exist in healthcare, and hopefully we are that company over a period of time.
Is Shopify and e-commerce also a good example? It is. That if Shopify did not exist, independent sort of business owners wouldn't be able to sort of start websites and start e-commerce. Very interesting. I think that helps. Also anecdotally, what are the different data points that you eventually align? Can you give us a customer journey for just layman understanding? If I'm in a hospital, what are the different types of data that today in a world where Innovaccer is absent is segregated, and in a world where Innovaccer is present is unified?
Yeah. So I think healthcare data is stored in multiple places. You go to firstly you go to different kind of doctors, right? So you go to primary care, but if you have to get a surgery done, you will go to a specialist. If you have heart problem, you'd go to a cardiologist, you specialist, oncology, and so on and so forth, right? So your data is basically firstly very, very fragmented. There's no unified health record for it, that exists. Not even basically at large systems, right? It sits in 10 different places, but if you want to know, what is your total health condition, there's no way you can get that, right? So firstly, I think just the storage of your clinical information is happening at different places,
and it's all segregated.
It's all segregated. That's one. Then I think on top of it, there is additional layers of complexity that where you get your labs done are different companies, and therefore your lab data is basically sitting on a different place. Where you get your imaging done is basically a different company. So that's basically I think sitting in a different place. Your socio-economic data is sitting basically in a different place. So now if you really wanted to create a 360-degree view of who you are as a person from a health perspective, there is no easy way to do that. So someone has to do I think the work of connecting these systems together, right? And creating what could basically be the 360-degree patient view for you. Once you have that, everything changes.
Yeah, I can cross so much.
So much. You could do risk predictions, you could do disease predictions, you could I think do decentralized clinical trials, you could I think think about
better diagnosis, better everything gets enabled.
So I think my general view is I don't know, like, I think, like, if we would be, like, I think, like, successful or not, like, I think, like, in becoming, like, the national standard for, like, I think, like, healthcare information infrastructure. But if we are, it's not going to reshape the technology. You could do everything fundamentally differently on top of it. Like, the revenue cycle processes. Last year, the US spent, like, $300 billion to basically get, like, your patient record from one side to the other. Like, that's it. Like, that is all that sort of really happened. $300 billion basically got spent. Like, and it is insane. Like, what are we talking about? Right? It's like,
That's crazy.
and that's India's healthcare spend.
Yeah. Overall.
1.5 billion people basically remain healthy in the same amount of money that we spent, like, here, like, I think, like, on transferring patient information from this side and to that side. That's it. Like, it's just, like, mind-boggling, like, some of these numbers that are sort of really there. Like, and our hope is that, like, I think if internet, like, infrastructure sort of really existed, like, I think, like, in healthcare, you could just basically, like, get rid of 1 trillion of waste, like, pretty easy. Yeah. So that's a long-term, like, I think, like ambition now. Like, now we have some ambition. Like,
You've accomplished all of it, so I think it's incredible. I have a very naive question, but do you, as a platform, connect existing data lakes, or do you build one from fresh so that you have more control over it?
so we sit on top of existing systems, but, like, I think, like,
You also have a layer of yourself. Okay, got it. Good, got it. But yeah, on the scale side, what are your learnings from, like, a 10 million to the current stage that you are? What has changed? Like, what have you discovered about yourself that you didn't previously know?
I think, like, there have been multiple parts of learnings that I've sort of really had, right? Like, one of the things that I sort of really learned was, don't let markets dictate, like, I think, like, what you do. Like,
Can I double click?
yeah, like, I think till, let's say, 2021, like, everyone was like, growth is basically everything. Like, let's basically go grow. Like, and I was like, let's grow. Right? Like, and I think what ended up sort of really happening is that the market sort of really changed, and suddenly, like, everyone was like, where is profitability? It's like, what are you guys talking about? Like,
just say something else.
And we had raised, like, I think, like, a lot of money, like, I think, like, till that point, like, and obviously you're responsible as the CEO to basically not, like, you've raised money, like, it's your, like, fiduciary responsibility to sort of be responsible towards, like, I think, like, others' money, like, and what I sort of really felt in that sort of, like, I think, like, moment was that I had let that investors would know better about your business than you, like, and so like, in a private context, like, your existing investor base and the investors that you're wanting to sort of raise money from are basically markets, right? Like,
They are the ones governing macro thinking for you.
yeah, like, and, like, I think, and if you're a public company, like, it's all of, like, I think, like, the investors, but if you're not, like, I think, like, it's it's that, right? Like, so I think that I had sort of really started thinking about what do investors want more than what customers want, like, at that point, and it was such a disaster. Like, I think, like, for me, the hardest time was basically where we had to do, like, I think, like, layoffs, like, in that sort of way time frame. Now, like, I don't want to basically, like, I think, like, cry, like, pity, like, or like, it was my decision, like, I think, frankly, like, but the thing is basically, like, I got sucked up into, like, hype, right? Like, that, hey, like, everything, like, this 2 billion, 3 billion valuation means something. Like, it doesn't. Like, what really means something is, like, are you delivering, like, I think, like, value to your customers, and are you able to capture basically some part of it as revenue and create some level of, like, I think, like, bottom line. That is, like, what building businesses are all about, right? Like, and all of this basically unicorn and like blah blah blah, like, means jack squat. Like right. So I think that was a realization that sort of really came a little bit like I think late, and it was like a hard learning, frankly. Like I think like for me, like I was doing like frankly for the first time, so everything has been learning. Like, but that was like I think a learning that was like a hard one for me. Like over, like at $70 million of ARR, we were basically like I think like burning $84 million. So what spending 154, right? At 200, we would be generating 20. Like right, like so I think like that sort of really like I think been like a hard learning. Like I feel like I had to go back to school like in some way, like and learn what building businesses is all about, because whatever I had learned till 2021 was like
Grow.
yeah, like and like so I think it was just such a deep amount of introspection element, like for me, who everything in my life was like up to the right till that point. Like you went to IIT, you started like I think like you got a great job, like I think like you got a great job,
Great progress,
like,
great funding, unicorn.
it's unicorn, like oh great, like I think like life is so great, like and then like I think like something like that sort of really hits. You actually don't know what to do because you're encountering failure for the first time, like right, and this is where like I'm coming back to like I think like your question, like how do you sort of manage scale? Get people around you who basically seen scale, like because one of the things that was great was to basically have people like Jonathan Bush, like who's basically built Athena like to $1 billion of revenue scale, to just say like this is normal, dude. Like this happens, like, and Dheeraj basically like I think like being like, dude, why are you so worried? Like I think like this is just like everyone's going through this, like because what ends up happening is like when you were building a company, it's to a certain degree isolating. Like you sort of like get stuck in some bubble, and you have to be like I think like you have to believe something which anyone else or no one else basically believes in, and so you sort of really create a bubble around you, like and having people who reside like I think like within that bubble, like who are smarter than you, who had more experience than you, like is so critical. Like and so like, I think like what I have sort of really felt is that at all points I will just sort of really have people around. When we were starting up, like it was people like I think like Krishna and like Anish and Rajan and a bunch of like these people, then Sumir, and then like but I've just basically like constantly kept getting people around me like who I know more than me, like and it will get very isolating for like especially like I think like the CEO. It's for all of my co-founders as well. Like I think like as someone who is in the founding like space, if you don't have people around you who've gone through that journey and have seen basically the next few phases of what is basically going to happen, like you can't really talk to anyone else, like because like you go talk to basically like I think like your team, no, I don't get anything, like which is like actually like I think like the case, like you are figuring it out yourself, right? Like you can't do that like all the time, maybe a little bit, but like not too much.
Right.
So having people around you where you could be vulnerable to a certain extent, like actually say that like I don't get it, like how do I sort of rebuild like the next stage? What is the kind of team that I need? Like how do I take hard decisions like layoffs, etc. Like if you don't have people like that, you will fall. Like and I think we've been incredibly lucky also, like because of the fact that we were like so young when we started up, so everyone looks at us and says like bacha log is doing something, right? Like so I think like we've had like incredible mentorship like all across the board, and finding the right mentors for startups and founders especially is critical. Like if you don't have that, no investor, no one is basically like I say Sumir, I treat him more as a like mentor than an investor, like and it is that kind of relationship, like I think like with like Westbridge in particular, I would say that when we had nothing, they believed in us. So it's like a little bit of like I think like that relationship like from Westbridge for sure. But like you will only get this, and Sumir also has been like he founded Westbridge, right? I think like having basically like I think like founders of that sort of like I think like stature, being around you, talking to them, and actually not pretending in front of them, is incredibly important. Get the feedback, know where you sort of stand, and if you're not feeling like I think like you know the answer, don't try to pretend at least in front of them. That's been scaling. I would say that has been like I think one of the biggest learnings. Have people around you that sort of really have seen the next stage of scale, because the rest of the problems are like actually too many. Do you build the right team? When do you go multi-product? How do you sort of rescale? What time do you think about profitability? There is so many of these problems that will sort of really keep happening. And every month, every quarter, every year, the problem set is basically going to evolve. What you have to basically create around you is this set of people that you can go to advice for. Because at all points, you are going to be clueless about a lot of things. So I think that's been at least something that I live by. I don't know if it will work forever, but I think today it works.
That's amazing. I really appreciate you being so candid about some of the challenging things and absolutely in the rawest manner. Thank you so much. I think this is very, very helpful. I love it, and I think super honest and candid on your end. Let's get to the other things, right? So let's say maybe AI, right? We're in the midst of the most important technological shifts of our life, perhaps, and you're in the thick and thin of things here. How are you looking at AI from where Indian founders can build? How are you looking at it from a healthcare lens? And also as a builder of a significantly large company, how are you leveraging it internally? I think it's multifaceted, but I'd love your thoughts on all of these different bits, and maybe you can go deeper into wherever you feel is helpful.
Yeah. So I have and we could sit here for the full day here talking about AI. Right? I would just say basically this is definitely a very meaningful shift, right? I think one of the things that I sort of really feel that Indian founders should be thinking about is where is the moat that they can sort of recreate. There are few success modes, I think. You could take a thing which is being done as services completely, you can convert that into AI today, right? That is shrink and own the market, right? So that is basically I think one of the things that you could sort of redo. Yeah. There is trillions of dollars of I think services spend that sort of happen. Pick up your niche, convert that into AI. That's basically huge market opportunity.
So earlier what was human intensive, you can automate that with AI, leverage that as an opportunity.
Yeah, and that's one. And that's basically going to happen at very, very large scale. So, right, every private equity is basically I think wanting to do this. But I feel converting something
existing
is I think going to be so much harder. Building it on your own and then basically scaling it is basically the companies that are going to sort of succeed, right? So that is a definite opportunity. There are so many massive services companies in India. The talent is there. People understand what's to be done. You can really build this right now. So pick up basically I think what niche. Don't just try to be a horizontal layer, right? It's probably hard for me to imagine that someone is basically going to build an OpenAI competitor today. Not just in India, anywhere. Right? There are probably 3 or 4 or 5 companies that sort of really I think exist today. There are probably going to be 2 or 3. The way it went in cloud, it's basically going to be the same story all over again. Right? So I think that's basically going to happen. So trying to probably build an infrastructure layer company, unless there is something meaningful that specialization that you could sort of redrive, like building like a medical LLM, like building like an automotive LLM, like legal LLM. Like I think like if you're sort of redoing that, a smaller language model, but more specialized, I think that is sort of really an opportunity. But other than that, I don't feel like at the infrastructure layer, there is too much opportunity for someone to sort of renew like have too much. So one basically like I think like pick up like a services piece. There was a bunch of money basically being spent there. People already have budgets. If you will go to them and say that I can cut your budget by 50%, like I think like there is going to be adoption of that. So that's one. The second is basically like I think like software user interfaces are going to be like becoming useless. Right, like all of our lives we've basically been filling forms. Like any software that you go to, like
Onboarding form,
sales,
whatever,
anything, right? Like filling forms, all of that is going to vanish.
Yeah, that'll be agentic.
Like I don't know, like I think like it's at least going to become conversational, right? Like the natural mode of us to communicate is conversation, right? And I think like software now or like has the ability to basically become conversational, right? So think about like I think like something that is being done like I think in work today, and just collapse it into a like conversational framework, right? That all of these like hundreds of forms that someone created and said that like we created a moat because we have 10,000 forms in our product. Do you really need it? Like, so I think like that is sort of like I think like a SaaS opportunity that like exists. That how do you sort of really collapse like some bit of software that sort of really existed like in the past, and now you sort of really like I think like get that to be working like as a conversation. Right. So that is like I think like the second opportunity that sort of really exists. I think the third like I think like massive opportunity that exists like I think like for like Indian founders in general is delivering like I think like services at scale, like not like I think like B2B services like only, but think about it like AIMS, like if you go to AIMS and get your diagnostic done, there is some knowledge base that we are working with, right? Like can we now create like I think like something that enables like an ASHA worker to be like as incredibly competent on diagnostics as basically like an AIMS doctor sort of really is, because like they sort of really have a knowledge base, right? Like so you can now democratize like I think like a lot of specialized knowledge like at scale and do it like I think like in a conversational like I think like form that could sort of really be like assistive like from a co-pilot perspective to a bunch of people, right? So we've always struggled like I think like as a society, like I think like in delivering like care to 8 billion people, like right, like how can you sort of really do that? Like I think like thinking about new business models that it could sort of really enable, right? Like can I have like 10,000 ASHA workers like I think like working like I think like for us like in every village, and like the cost of delivering this service like of high quality care and diagnostic like service, which used to cost let's say like 2 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees, can I now basically do that like at 20,000 bucks, right? Like so the cost of delivering like services and goods like I think like is going to reduce, like it can reduce like I think like today, and that's a huge business model opportunity like because of AI. So I think those are the three areas that I feel like have big impact, like areas that someone can create like I think like a large business out of, and these are the things that would sort of really exist. What I would caution against is basically like I think like building like I think like wrappers. Like now the thing is like some of these wrappers are going to get to 10, 20, $50 million of revenue very, very quickly. Like but then OpenAI basically comes up, or like Anthropic sort of really comes up like the next upgrade, like I think like you are done. Right. Like so thinking about these things, like businesses still have to be built, and it's going to be hard. Like if it seems too easy and that business is probably like I think like going to see initial scale because of novelty. It's like I think like everyone was a .com company at some point, everyone is a .ai company today, but I don't think basically that any of those businesses will have like any sustainable advantages over the long term, even if they are doing tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue today. Like there's going to be a lot of like I think like hype cycle recession that sort of really like I think like happens. People are going to sort of really like realize that like I think like just building like a funny like I think like chat thing like or an agent that sits on top of OpenAI with like I think like a new wrapper like I think like is not really a sustainable business model. Like and so don't get sucked up like into the hype of it. Understand like what is your differentiated moat over the longer term period. At least that's how I sort of really think about it. Like maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but like I think like that is sort of like my like general viewpoint for sure.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Very, very interesting ideas. All worthy of admiration. I love that thinking. What's your thought on AI in healthcare? How are you seeing that evolved? And because a bunch of companies are now doing very specialized sort of healthcare AI, right? Like think labeling of healthcare data, pre-diagnosis, post-diagnosis, post-treatment. People are talking about genetics and, like how that can shape like personalized medicine.
Yeah.
So much is happening. Like, I mean, I'm sure the world is your oyster. I think there's a YC company doing just call recordings for humans and like patient and doctor interactions that again become part of this data. And so that next time visits can be more enhanced and, you can record some of this. How have sort of you seen what's the use case that you are most excited about? If you had to take a punt on like how healthcare or anything more like specific to your, what your areas of interest are.
So the bet that we have sort of really taken is that there's going to be an explosion of like I think like point solutions in this sort of like space, right? And most large systems will need like I think like an orchestration sort of like layer. Right.
So you will build that out.
So Gravity, which is like I think like the platform that we've sort of relaunched, is effectively how do you think about like agentification of like your enterprise? Like how do you get like I think about this. Let's say someone is building a scribe, someone is building a coding agent, someone is building an auth agent, someone is building a diagnostic like thing. How do these people, these agents communicate with each other? Like
How to provide data.
Yeah, like so the thing that will, even if they are really really good and they don't basically like have like a way to sort of really communicate like and get with each other, you are like looking at so much trouble. Like we are spending $4.5 trillion, we will spend $20 trillion like very quickly, like because everyone is basically doing something and then they don't have a way to communicate. Like everyone has
It's not efficient. I'm guessing efficacy will take a toll on all of that, right? Because you're just working off like biased stuff, right? If you're working in isolation.
Yeah, and so like I think what we've sort of really like taken a bet on is the fact that there is a need for this orchestration layer, like I think like in the middle, and we are basically going to be like the orchestration layer. We're going to have like I think like few of these things like of our own, which are first party. There are going to be things that are third parties. We're working with multiple startups right now, come build basically like on top of our platform.
Yes.
So we sort of really like I think like be the orchestration layer for a lot of these things. And because a lot of existing systems have been so closed, like having like an open ecosystem, like I think players like us sort of really come and open this up is probably what the industry needs, and that's the layer that we are sort of really betting on.
That's amazing. And is this layer, so is this like, can like customers build on top of this or can developers build on top of this? Like how does this work?
So right now it's first party, like I think like offerings that we sort of really have. It is also opened up to customers to basically build like I think like their own agents on top of it. By October or November, we'll also open it up to like startups.
Those startups.
That's to sort of really build on top of it.
Amazing. Got it. That's super helpful. Yeah, these are the two things. On the third aspect, how are you using data like AI internally? Like, is there like, because people are talking, and again, this has become mainstream conversation that X amount of code is now, generated by AI. This amount of code review is happening by AI. But like, have you seen something like what is the significant delta that you are seeing because of AI in internal processes? Is like the incremental hiring that you would have to do, has that gone down? What are some of your observations in that front?
So I think like the metric that we sort of really measure is effectively layering what is the size of a Scrum team. Like right, like I think it used to sort of be 8 people. It's now 4.5 people.
What team?
A Scrum team is basically like a
Okay.
like a product manager, like a design person, like a number of engineers, right? To deliver like a certain set of product, right? So that's the big
8 to 4.5 is almost like a 40%.
40% for like reduction.
Yeah.
So our general view is that like I think there is we are able to do a lot more, right? So the number of products that we are sort of working on in parallel has like increased quite a bit, right? So we have so much to build that like I can use like any number of people right now, but I think the way and sort of
Output per person has increased
significantly, and that's basically like on the dev side, even on basically things like data integration and themes of that nature, like more data engineering themes, that number has basically gone from like 4.2 to 2.1, right? 50% reduction. The team says that it could basically go down to like I think like 80%. With gravity and like all of these things that we're sort of deploying, like the identification that they're sort of doing, it can go down like by 80%. So what it means is that like even if we had like I think like 4x 5x of like I think like the customers, we don't sort of like need to increase like capacity. I'll give you a number, right? We've not added a single net person on headcount going from 70 million to 210 million.
Wow.
3 times the revenue, same number of people.
That is crazy.
So
Wow, you should write something about this. This is a benchmark for a lot of other companies, I'm sure.
it also could mean like we were bloated earlier. But like I think like our sense is like we will probably go from where we were to like 4.5 times of revenue without adding a net person.
That's insane. That is amazing. And where you were being 70 or 200?
70 to 280.
Okay. That's amazing. That is incredible. Wow, this is really, really helpful. I think we've covered a bunch of ground. I think towards the end, I just want to cover maybe a series of like final questions that I usually ask most others. In your journey, you've now started Z21, right? Which is your investing arm that you all have put together, and it's doing some great work. You also mentioned that you're passionate about like just deep sciences, deep innovation, technically strong founders. Talk to us about what that means to you. Like, where does that fascination come from? Apart from, of course, you are extremely like, you come from a technical background, having worked in technical phases, but what are experiences that have shaped such thinking? What are signs of technical founders? And you were telling me some really interesting spaces that you looked at via Z21. Maybe you could talk about its inception as well. I'd love to understand like where does that part of you come from, because I'm sure like the founder side is just so heavy that you have very limited time. So how do you sort of spend time beyond that is an interesting thing to understand.
My general view, like I think like very early, like I think like there is so much incredible stuff to build.
Yeah.
Like, I think like
It is so harsh.
so if you've gotten the privilege of studying engineering, like build stuff, so that's like I think like been at least my thinking from the get go. We've sort of like I think like gotten as I told you, like I think like earlier, like all of us basically could have gone into management consulting. All of us basically like I think they could have sort of gotten to go do like bunch of like other stuff that like a lot of people sort of end up doing. And nothing against that. It's just like I think like I just feel like I think like that if we got the privilege of studying basically like I think like engineering at such incredible places, we should use that, right? So I've always sort of really been like a big fan of building. We used to basically watch like I think like what Steve Jobs was saying like I think like at undergrad it's just like I think like fairly inspiring to like a deep degree, like I think like for me for sure, and like I think like Kanav is the same, and Ankit is the same, like and Sandy is the same. Like all of us basically like felt like we are going to go build stuff. That was the job that I did. That was like I think like the company that we are sort of rebuilding, and so when it became like a little bit like, I think, like sizable, one of the things that I wanted to sort of redo was to promote more technical entrepreneurship coming out of like at least like India's top engineering schools. And whatever we've had like the good fortune of learning, we got a bunch of like opportunities and experiences, right? Like a lot of it is also serendipity, like, right? Like I think stuff happens, and we got this opportunity, like I think, so if we've got that opportunity, like to sort of really get to, so a lot of people, like I think, like founders generally sort of reached out to us, like, okay, like, will you invest? Like, and like I ended up sort of like investing in that everything like that he thought to me like for. And what it sort of really like I think like ended up becoming is that when they came to me for like actual help, like I wasn't able to do that. Right. So the way Z21 sort of really started was that there is a group of us, like maybe 100 of us like here, which are Silicon Valley executives, like company builders, etc. All of us were basically like wanting to do the same. Like, so we got a bunch of them together, said, let's put in like, I think like money. We got like, I think like large and Jyotika basically like, I think, and Sudarshan sort of really like, I think like were 3 people who were wanting to do this full time. We got a bunch of these 100 people together and said that let's basically create like a community plus fund. So it's not just a fund, like, so there is like a community of like I think like 200 like Silicon Valley executives like that are all LPs, like so they're truly invested in like getting like I think like success to these founders, and they're people at senior levels at Uber and Google and Microsoft and like SpaceX and Tesla and all of these sort of really places, right? Like so if you really wanted to sort of really learn from them, we have a community of these people who are able to sort of really tell you like how to build a chip, like how do you sort of really think about like building a rocket, SpaceX like I think like type company. If you really wanted to sort of really figure out like how to build like a racing car, or like how do you build like eVTOL, like all of those sort of like things, there are people that have tried it here. So all of the things that we talked about earlier, like what are failure modes, like there are people who've experienced a bunch of that, like both successes and failures, right? Like so how do you get like that community engaged in a meaningful way? And we call this like purposeful capitalism, right? Like that is not like not for profit, like to a certain extent. It is basically like I think like capitalism to its core, where like purpose driven founders, if you want to sort of really do this, there is the community of like people that will help you. So it's not, we've not just raised money from like I think like large institutions. It's mostly a collection of founders, execs, and those type of people like coming together and really helping these communities. So that was sort of really the intent, that how do we put structure to it? Because like I think like just spraying like money
or doing ad hoc, it doesn't help.
It really like didn't help the founder. Like my money was gone. I don't even know where I've invested in. And so like putting some structure to it, like and really making it an institution was sort of really the intent there for sure.
That's amazing. What are some of the spaces that you are investing in? Because I found it very interesting when you were mentioning when you were grabbing coffee before the recording.
Yeah.
So I'd love to understand.
What are areas that we have like I think certain degree of competency in, that we could be helpful at? Enterprise software always, obviously, like I think like I've gone through so much. Like I've done 2 PhDs. Like I feel like 1 5-year stint is a PhD. I've now done 2. Like so enterprise software, I think like I have like a certain degree of understanding on how to sort of rebuild like enterprise software. And Raj basically like was like VP of product. Like I think for us, like before that, right, he was he was at Berkeley, like a PhD from there. Like Jyotika worked at Glassdoor. Like Sudarshan sort of really like built a company of his own. So I think like software, we sort of really have like I think like understanding. The other thing like which I don't think like a lot of people sort of would think is traditionally right for VCs, but we think like is going to be like really large is IP based hardware, right? Like that one of the companies that we've sort of really invested in, for example, is this company called Hand Nozzles. They basically use fluid dynamics for fire suppression systems. So the logic effectively is like, if you basically hold this like the pipe that basically like is used for shutting down fires, there's so much pressure that sort of really comes, right? But if you change the flow of that water, like the pressure basically reduces, and one person can sort of really manage that, right?
So you like man cost,
And like
efficient.
you could change the flow again, and it could basically like same amount of water could basically like I think really save like
many.
Yeah, right.
It will differ.
So they've been incredible. Like this is like I think like IIT Kanpur guy, like I think like PhD from like some of the universities here, like incredibly bright. And this is what he's sort of really working on. Like we saw that, like I think we said like, okay, great, like this seems like I think like an incredible area to sort of reinvest in. Similarly, like I think like we invested in companies that are building like propulsion system for like I think like rockets. We're basically like also investing in companies that are building AWS for satellite and launching satellites. We are investing in companies that are building like an autonomous version of like the next Goldman Sachs, like automated like I think like investing and like figuring out like systems like that. So I think like a lot of like the investments that we've done like are traditionally companies
which may not receive as much capital, but
but these are massive problem areas. It was like us, right? Like healthcare data infrastructure. Who cares about it? No one. Before you sort of really create a large company, like someone is building like the next AI version of Autodesk. Just think about it. After AutoCAD, there is no business that has sort of really built in that space. And that is the biggest application of generative AI. Like if you could create like I think like these like design systems and like stuff of that nature, it's incredible. So I think like these are areas that are fascinating areas that I feel and that there should be companies in and so a lot of like I think like Raj Jyotika and Solutions done like such an incredible job. Like I think like are doing this. Like I'm just basically there like there's so much to do it. I'm just basically like I think like there to sort of, if any founder basically needs any help, like I'm there to sort of really like be helpful with my experience. It's not that I know everything, but I can tell you basically like failure modes. So that's sort of what I'm generally there for. And like I've been like super impressed by like these founders. Like most of them have basically raised like I think like the next rounds. Like I think like average growth of these companies has been like 450% like a year.
Incredible.
So like I feel like it's doing well. Like but like I think like for me the biggest advantage is that I learn so much. They feel like I think they are learning. Like I get to learn so much about like application of new technology and how they are sort of rethinking about like I think the new world for sure.
That's incredible. That is lovely to hear. Such exciting times, and I love how you've extended your passion with not just building your own company, but by paying it forward, learning from them, and the humility, the want to learn is also evident, and the passion with which you just spoke about it is just like it shows. For the second last question, this is beyond the entrepreneurship, but if I had to ask a group of your friends to describe you, what would they say?
I think I love watching movies. Like I'm generally like fairly optimistic person. Like I really think good things happen to good people. And I'm almost always like I think like highly optimistic about like the outcome. In most cases it doesn't work out, but like I think like in the 2 cases out of 10 that it works out, like it works out logically. And I think like anyone that you'd sort of really speak to like across I think everyone would sort of retell you like that I am like that. I also love to like read it up. Like I feel amongst the people around me like I am like I don't read books as much as basically like I think like being on just snippets and like blogs and all of those sort of like things. But I would probably think that I read 10 hours a day. So me like anything, everything from like what's happening in Iran and Israel to basically what's happening in India to what's happening here to like what's happening in tech, like what is Sam Altman thinking about what is. I feel like I think like it is really really helpful for me to sort of like do my job. Like I read a ton. I love Shah Rukh Khan and Rajnikant movies.
Wow, I was not expecting that on the list.
Yeah. I can't tell you, like, I think, like, Rajnikant far more than Shah Rukh Khan, but, like I would not, like, I think, discredit Shah Rukh, like, it's amazing. And then, like, I think, like, dude, like, I'm from Lucknow. I love eating.
Yeah.
Food, tunde kebabs, or basically chole bhature, like, I think, like, that is sort of, like, the other thing that I really, really enjoy. And the most important thing that has sort of really become, sort of, like, I think, like, my primary job at this point is, like dad to my 3-year-old daughter Avni, like and if you said like what was one meaningful change in my life that happened, like I think like over the last 10-15 years, I don't think like I think the founder thing like has been a change. Like being a dad to a 3-year-old and really learning the worldview from her eyes is been such a privilege. Like it is incredible. I don't think like people talk a lot about that. But the ways kids shape you, like when you feel like a sense of responsibility towards them, when you see basically like I think like how do they look at the world and first principles questions that they sort of really end up asking, it is magic. Like and like even if you go to my LinkedIn, like I think like it says Avni's dad first and then it basically says like everything else. So like I just feel like I think in all of this race of like like creating companies, doing what we are doing, like we shouldn't sort of really forget, like I think that the most important things in our lives is the people around us, and anything can go wrong, and these are the people that would sort of really I think like care for you. So your friends and like I think your family, like my wife, my parents, like I just feel like I think that is like a very very important thing for me for sure.
I love that. I love how well you have mentioned that. That is amazing to sort of witness. In fact, so much of what I learn on the podcast beyond these conversations on the record is actually the softer aspects of life and appreciating it. And almost most people end up mentioning a version of this. So thank you so much for sharing. For the last question, we usually go back to a point in time that is pivotal. So maybe if you could go back to your IIT Kharagpur graduation day, and if you were telling yourself something, and the benefit of condensing learnings 15 years since, what would you tell yourself?
I think biggest thing I would sort of like say to myself is like I think like have you seen 3 Idiots? Yes. I think it's like this. Life is a race. Like don't ever do it. Like it's not. It's really long. Like what you have to understand is that like a lot of time, like I think like society forces you to be like I think like in a race. So like. And that you have to basically by 30 do this, like by 40 do this, like I think I'm telling you basically, dude, that I've been on all lists. Like I was like 25 under 25, I was 30 under 30, I was 40 under 40, like I've been on all lists. Like, dude, it's not a race. Like, and frankly, like the one thing that like Warren Buffett sort of like I think like said really well when someone asked was the fact that why do you think like most people, how would you invest? Like was the question, right? Like, and what he said was, I would pick great companies and hold them for a really long period of time. Like, and so the person in front effectively said that, hey, like that's like so simple. That can't just be it, right? Like, and what he sort of really ended up saying is, and that way, like everyone should be rich. And so what he ended up sort of really saying after that is, most people are not rich because they don't want to get rich slowly. Like, and if like most people end up losing everything because they wanted to get rich quickly. And if you have the patience and if you let compounding sort of really work in your favor, whether that's like compounding of like I think like knowledge, whether that's compounding of like I think like your like people around you, like of what you're sort of be learning, you are going to end up like I think like being great. But in this race of like I think like let me switch like I think like 2 more jobs like because like I want to get to like I think like the next higher thing, you don't let compounding work into your favor, and so like all of the continuity that you sort of really built in like compounding then needs to restart like I think like somewhere else, and so that's what I've sort of really felt that frankly if I was doing a job like I would have still been at Ingersoll Rand. I loved it. I loved working with the people. The only reason that I would ever switch like from one thing to the other is that I don't like the people. It's really important for me who are the people that I sort of really work with, and as long as that's sort of really there and they care for me, I care for them, like and all of those sort of really things. Let compounding work, and I think Charlie Munger said that, and not Warren Buffett, but I feel one of those two basically I think did, and that has stuck with me forever. Don't be in a race. Like anyone who's basically telling you all of these things, like rule of 40, like rule of this, like rule of that, dude. Like none of that means it. Like we've been like great at like I think like all of these things, and I'm telling you like the only fundamental thing that sort of really has mattered for me is, can I trust the people that I'm sort of like around? Like, are we basically like I think like with common values? Like, do we want the same things in life? And if I go to sleep like sleeping well at night, that is what I'm solving for. Because it's like every other rules, like someone made up, like, and you just basically are sort of like believing it. So the only natural basically like I think like growth curve is like the exponential growth curve. If you let compounding happen, everything else is basically like someone telling you something that doesn't matter.
That's brilliant. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I love every bit of it. I think not just the learnings that you have tactically shared on company building, which are enormous because what you are doing is absolutely phenomenal from a revenue state, cycle, sector type of company lens, but also the software learnings are amazing. Your intellectual curiosity is so commendable, and the authenticity with which you have shared all your learnings means the world. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we did this, and I'm confident that everybody who is watching will benefit from it.
That's been great. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Hello. If you made it this far, you've probably watched the entire episode. And if you've done that, I'm really grateful. I and my team try to put in a lot of effort to ensure that we can bring the best quality content to you. So if you liked the episode, if you watched it thus far, my request to you is to share it with people, to subscribe to the channel, and to ensure that we can keep growing. We are everything and anything only because of you, our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll keep bringing to you amazing content. Cheers.